Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest survived the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands, immigrated to Canada, built successful businesses, is a bodybuilder, and is the author of 4 nonfiction books: Against All Odds, ADHD Unlocked, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream, and Living Young, Dying Old. His name is John A. Brink, and my interview with John will follow the teleportation sound. John A. Brink, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay, my name is John A. for Aaron Brink, B-R-I-N-K, and I'm a podcaster, obviously. I'm a businessman. I have a lumber company. I'm a speaker. I was born in 1940 in northeastern Holland, so should be 84 this year. I'm into health and fitness. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, and so that's about it. And I'm very active as a podcaster and a guest.
You've written 4 books, and these are, I'm going to recite them in alphabetical order: ADHD Unlocked, Against All Odds, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream, and Living Young, Dying Old. Without spoiling too much about each book, what is it about?
Well, the first one actually is, you mentioned ADHD, but the first book that I wrote is Against All Odds. That is an autobiography. It's about all the things that I've done in my 84 years, bringing me to Canada and doing all the things that I do today, but starting out with nothing. Couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. But had a dream of building a lumber mill. I did that in many other companies. So that is the one. It's not about how successful John is, but rather all the challenges along the way and what I did about it. The second one that you make references to is ADHD Unlocked. It took me 32 years to, when I came to Canada, to find out, and I was at the time 58 years old. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 62. Which was a shock. I never heard of ADHD. And obviously, the more I heard about it, the more I started checking into it. It is something that is very common, really, around the world, both in males and females. I initially thought the percentage be about 8%. It's probably more like 20 or 25%. And so I felt I had to write a book about it because it still had a lot of stigma about it, and to at least write it from my perspective as somebody that has and lives with ADHD, obviously my whole life, still today, I call it a superpower. That's what it is all about. The other one that you referenced is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream, is about the importance of, I heard a television show, actually, I don't know, CNN or ABC or one of the other ones, said that about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, said that in the United States, and I believe Canada is the same, that probably 75% of the people that work do not like their jobs. And likely 70% of the 75% are looking for other jobs. And I do a lot of presenting to young people at high schools, colleges, universities, and I always respectfully suggest to them, once they are finished, what are you going to do? And most of the time they say, I don't know. And I believe that it is important to start learning early and understanding what other people do and what may be of interest to you as a person. So I say, you want to be a truck driver? Talk to truck drivers. See what they do. What is your life like? How about the pay? How about this, that, and the other thing? You want to be a contractor? Talk to contractors. They all love to talk to people that want to do what they are doing. And if you want to be a doctor, talk to doctors. They love to talk to you, or lawyers, or, for that matter, entrepreneurs or CEOs. And so I felt I had to write a book about that. And the book is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And saying with you then, John, which would be a good question, is that after working, I left school at 13, failed grade 3, failed grade 7, started working in a furniture factory in Holland when I was 13. And in the 70 years that I've been working up to today, are you living the dream, John? I am. I get up every morning at 5:30. I always think I'm late. I'm in a hurry. I always make my bed and I enjoy every day. And my foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic, meaning attitude, avoid the negative. No matter how tough things are today, I know it's going to be a better day tomorrow. Whatever I do, I give it 125%. And as I already indicated, work ethic, I work harder than anybody. And even now, still at nearly 84, that's what I'm doing. And I'm writing another book. So those are the 4 books that I have out right now. I'm writing another 2 books, one on the communications. I haven't got a title for it, but it comes out next July 25. And then the other one is about the lumber industry, and particular British Columbia. And so I try to write one book a year, but I started that about 5-6 years ago.
When did you start writing books, and what's your best advice for people who are in their 50s or older who want to write books for the first time?
Well, that's me. I wrote the first book when I was well into my 60s, Against All Odds. And a lot of times people said to me, "Hey, John, you got such an interesting life. Why don't you write a book?" As they say to many others. And so I try, but writing books is not easy. So I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped. So Against All Odds is about, I lived it for 80 years, thought about writing a book about it for 20. And once I made up my mind, it took me 2 years to write it. And so the key is understand writing and then decide what you're going to write about and what style it will be, what type of book it will be. How do you get it done physically and writing it, editing it, having a bit of a team involved in so that the book makes sense to the common people. And in my case, my style of writing is I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. That's what I do in my presentations. That's what I do in my podcasting. That's what I do in my books. And then the books, once I decided the size of the books, the fonts of the books, the style of the writing of the books, then from there and then I started, and then from there and then I added the other topics that are important to me or what I want to share with the rest of the world. And so that's what I'm doing. But it's not easy and it takes time. Do not have illusions in most cases that as soon as you write the book and as soon as you make it noted that you have a book, that all of a sudden the books are flying out of the door. That's not the way it works. It takes time. And then I believe that all my books, although I started writing Against All Odds about 5-6 years ago, when I was in my late 70s already, actually, and that I know any one of my books will become million copy sellers.
What are the easiest and hardest parts about writing books for you?
It's understanding the process and then from there on in bringing them to market and understanding that process. So in my case, I'm a businessman. I have lumber companies and a number of other companies. We have 4 silos, actually. The one is lumber manufacturing. We have 3 or 4 different lumber mills in British Columbia, mainly in northern British Columbia. The second one is that, we do warehousing, distribution, and logistics. We're probably the largest warehousing company in northern British Columbia. And then the third one is real estate. We do residential, commercial, and industrial real estate, very active there. And the fourth one is about media. And media that includes writing books, podcasting, and likely I'm in the process of forming a platform that probably will launch in the next couple of months.
Are all four of your books self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published, or did you use more than one publishing method for your books?
No, we publish the books ourselves, and we have somebody else that does the actual printing, but we are the publishers of the books, and we manage the whole process. And the marketing of the books is ongoing. The next stage will be, I did audio, although I'm already, as you probably gathered, I'm ADHD, and I'm also dyslexic. Dyslexia is something very common again, and a lot of times in cases like me, it's people that have ADHD and dyslexia or something else like that. So I do also audio, and I read it myself, my books myself. The next step is that we will publish them internationally. We will translate them in different languages, and all en route to become a major publisher of our books.
How can people who don't have ADHD help erase the stigma against it?
Read my book. ADHD, no question about it. Obviously, let me give you a little bit here. I was born in 1940, born during the Second World War, saw far too much in one of the most difficult areas of Holland when it was invaded by the dictator Adolf Hitler. My dad was called into the Dutch army, and the last time they heard from him was when Rotterdam was bombed by the Germans, and thousands of people died. And we did not know if he was dead or alive for 5 years. My mom had two older children than me. I was born in November 1940, so we had 3 kids trying to survive the war. We saw far too much, hundreds of Allied planes in the air in the mid-40s, 1943, 44, bombing Germany and the infrastructure that built weapons. And then the other one was the Hunger Winter in 1944-45. All the Germans had cut off all the food supply. Tens of thousands of kids, in particular, and elders that were vulnerable, died because of hunger. And then the cold of the coldest winter on record. As kids, the 3 of us would every morning go with gunny sacks to the railroad, pick up anything edible and burnable. Then we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. And I was so impressed by this that I knew from that point forward I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And it took me till I was 23. And then, obviously, as I already said it, academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3 and failed grade 7 3 times. Started working when I was 13. And then I went to Canada, and I knew I would start brand new, from the ground up. Couldn't speak the language, didn't know, so I didn't take any money. I only had $25.47 when I came off the bus here in Prince George, Central British Columbia, and with the dream of building a lumber mill. I did that, and several other ones, and then several other companies. And I'm still, with all the different silos, including media, of lumber, warehousing, real estate, and media, we will double each one of those silos in size. And even now, at nearly 84, I'm still very active and look forward to the next 5, 10, 20 years. And if I could show you, I will show you if you can watch, but this is not visual, but I'll show you a copy of a book, Living Young, Dying Old. That's a copy of me. And I'm flexing. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. So I want to stay fit and live till I'm 120.
My next question is about your work as a bodybuilder. How does it feel to be an active bodybuilder in your 80s?
I love it. I go to the gym regularly. I'm in excellent condition. I'm fit. And my trainer would say I work harder than anybody half my age or less than half my age. Nobody works as hard as I do. And I do that in my job. Everything that I do, I give it 125%. And in 2025, when I'm 85, I was going to the Arnold's in 2018-19, and unfortunately then COVID came, and so I'm again training for the Arnold's in 2025 when I'm 85, and I will be competing again at the Arnold's. And I've contacted Arnold several times to get on my podcast, and if you ever talk to him, tell him I'll be there.
Or as Arnold Schwarzenegger will say, I'll be there. My next question regarding Against All Odds, your autobiography. There's an interview series on YouTube, and I'll include a link to that in the text description of this episode once it's uploaded. But there's an interview series on YouTube that you did with Veronica Beltran to promote Against All Odds. What was it like to work with Veronica on the interview series?
It was exciting, that most of those kind of interviews, I love to do them, and especially with people of her quality.
I have two more questions to finish out this interview. And the first of those two is that you host a podcast called On the Brink. What can listeners expect from a typical episode of your podcast?
So, first experience, I've done about 300 where I'm hosting, about 150 to 200 of being guest. So I've done about 500. They are all different in different ways. I never know what to expect. It's always storytelling. We find the best. That's why you are on as well, or that's why I'm on with you, is that we always find the best around the globe. So it's always interesting. The other part is that I release my podcast either live or the same day, no longer than 24 hours later. So, and it could be on any topics from any place in the world, from South Africa to Central Europe, you name it. I do about 6 podcasts a week, and and we never know what will happen. But we seldom do any editing on it. The only time, and that was probably about a year and a half ago, that we did a podcast, and all of a sudden, while I was introducing my guest, we had an earthquake, and the whole building and my studio started shaking. I said, I didn't swear, fortunately, but I said, oh my God, and I forget now the podcast number, but it's still there somewhere. And we said, okay, we'll leave that in too.
My final question for this interview: why do you love connecting with other people so much?
That's a very good question, because I love to be in touch. It is finding friends is a big part of being fit and healthy, and being challenged mentally is very, very important. That's why I do podcasting. That's why I write books. That's why I'm a speaker. And the best part about giving presentation to me is always Q&As. And so what I like about podcasting, like I do with you, I never know what the questions will be, and whatever they are, I would love it, and I love to interact. And that's what I do, and that's what I do all the time. But also in my 80s, it's contrary to other opinions about it, that age is just a number. It is maintaining fitness mentally, physically, and stay active with your body, because your body, and that's how it applies to most people, is extremely forgiving, but you can only abuse it so long, and then it gives out. Usually in the last decades of somebody's life, where they take hands full of chemicals, medicines, and then from there on it's straight downhill. I try not to do that. I try to stay mentally, physically active. That's why I go to the gym. That's why I'm podcasting. That's why I'm writing books and tell stories. I'm active.
John, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an amazing and interesting guest.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
It is amazing to be able to interview interesting people like John, and I'll include a link to an interview series Veronica Beltran did with John in the text description of this episode. Before I sign off, I offer my condolences to those who admired and respected the work of James Earl Jones, who passed away a few days ago. Among many other roles, James was the voice of Darth Vader in the Star Wars franchise. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. May the Force be with you. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.